Hey everyone, welcome into episode 3 of my interactive tutorial. I think I forgot to mention it in episode 2, but I'll mention it again here. This is completely interactive, so if you are watching this and didn't see any of the other episodes, you can actually download this park that we're in and build along with me in the video. So if you don't already have it downloaded, there's a link in the description. Go ahead and download the park, pause the video, and then once you've got it all set up, you can follow along as we build some custom roofs. So the first example of a custom roof that we're going to build is just this circular spire here. This is really simple. It can add a ton of detail to whatever you're using. Again, this is, like I mentioned with the custom walls, depending on what you're trying to accomplish is going to determine the pieces that you use to complete the spire. So in this instance, I wanted it to sort of look like a metal spire, and so I just used this wooden piece and colored it a sort of metalish gray color. Now, what I find when I'm doing custom roofs and custom domes is you always want to start with one of these pillars. Raise it up in the air so so you've got some good height on it, and then I always take an off-grid beam. So this is just a 4-meter wooden column, and I try to center it on that grid piece as much as possible. So it looks like I'm actually a little bit off here, which is okay. It doesn't have to be perfect, but so what that does is it gives you an object to pull pieces from that are already centered on the grid. So if I hit Control X on this, we'll go down to our wooden beam. That's too big. And use the advanced move to get it in the right position. And then I think all I did here was just use the 15 degree. Yeah. So you can, depending on the shape of the circular spire you're trying to complete, this could be a completely different angle. It's up to you. There's tons of flexibility there. You can remove the angle snap and adjust it however you want. It really is, oh, shoot. It really is up to you on what you want to accomplish. That's where the flexibility comes into play. And your creativity can take over. So we'll go back to there. Now here's an example of where the global world access can come into handy too, because right now it's the widget tool is attached to this piece. So if I move it in and out like that, it's going to be at a slope upwards or downwards depending on which way I go. What you can do also, alternatively, if you don't want to change the elevation but want to keep the angle of something, if you use the world tool, it's going to level you out. So your angle stays the same and your elevation stays the same. So that's just one more advantage of how you can use the global grid. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you're doing this, you don't want the piece to stick out the other side, because what's going to happen is well, maybe you do. I mean, if you were creating something where it had sort of a flare at the top of it, you might want to actually have the piece sticking out, because what's going to happen is as you copy this around, it's going to create sort of a cone in this direction. But for this purpose, we don't want that. So we're going to bring it back out to this edge here. And we'll go ahead and copy the color. Our most recent color used now. So that's step 1. Step 2 then is selecting the grid piece and the non-grid piece, hitting Control D to copy. And whenever you do this, before you copy it, I should have made note, you want to make sure you're on the 4-meter grid height, because what that does is it just makes it easier to line it up properly. If you've got like the half-meter or the 1/4 meter, there's a lot of wiggle room and you can end up getting sort of a lopsided structure. So being on the 4-meter grid height, it just makes it a lot easier to place the piece. And then we'll go ahead and delete that extra grid piece. So that's step 2. Step 3 then is just selecting the non-grid pieces. And what that does is it gives you the option to duplicate an advanced move. So if we hit Control X on our hotkey, we've got 15-degree angle snap on. And now what I find that's easiest to do is first fill in all the gaps that you can. So we've got a 45-degree angle, hit Control, select the other two, hit Control X, rotate 45 degrees again. And now you've got the general makings of your spire here. All right, select all those again, hit Control X. Now if we stay on the angle snap here, we can kind of fill in the gaps, but you can see down at the bottom there's still going to be something missing. So what I usually do is I'll hit Shift to take the angle snap off, and I line up the bottoms. I'm not as concerned about these top pieces overlapping because once it's all together, it won't be quite as noticeable. So hit Control X again, and line up the bottoms. Control X one more time, and fill in the gap. So there you go. You've got a custom spire now. And you can see that this one actually looks a tiny bit different than that one. The reason being is I'm betting that this one I had the top part moved in closer to the center of this beam. But that's just an example of how you can start getting variety in these things. So the further you move away from the central pivot point, the bigger your diameter is going to be for the spire. So yeah, there's tons of ways you can get a lot of creativity and flexibility by using that technique. So that is pretty much it for the spire. This is an example of a custom roof on a square building. So again, I didn't have to use a ton of pieces to accomplish that finished product down there. But it still looks great, and it's completely different size than what you could get doing anything else in the game. So we'll open this up, and in this instance I actually want the 2-meter grid size, and I'll show you why in a second. So we'll copy that around. Oops. Okay, so the reason being is that if I started out with just these walls, and the reason I want the 2-meter grid size is if I go to this wooden post here, it's going to allow me to put a post in the dead center, which is what I want ultimately. And the reason being is that we're going to use this post to copy things around to all 4 sides of the structure. So same thing as we did with the spire. I'm going to take this column here, add it to that, sink it just slightly below the top of that piece, and then just center it as closely as you can. Okay. Now what I used here is this piece. So the 2-meter wooden beam is on the ground there, and I'm going to make it upright. So make sure your angle snap is back on, hit Shift to make sure it's back on, and then bring it out, down, to the corner, and then we're going to hit Control X again and rotate it 45 degrees. So it's 15, 30, 45. So now we know it is the correct angle to sort of be that corner piece there. Then I'll bring it inwards, and I think for this example, I just did 15 degrees in. Yeah. Okay, so it's pretty much centered, and the reason it's important that it's centered here is because we're going to use this beam to copy it around, and that is going to ensure that all of the posts that are inward facing or inward sloped are going to be lined up correctly. So go ahead and copy the color. And I should mention too, by no means did I come up with these techniques. These are just things that I've picked up from seeing other people use them. I just wanted to create something in one location where you could, follow along step by step and do it yourself, because that's the way that I learned personally. I learn best when I'm actually doing something versus just watching it. So to bridge the gap for the shingles in between these two, we'll take a piece from the center here. I want something that's a little bit smoother, actually, so I'm going to use this 4-meter wooden piece here, which is right over in this area. And we'll rotate it. And we'll do it that way too, actually. And we're going to use that as sort of a decorative edge. But then it's also going to serve the purpose of helping us get our shingles lined up to the correct angle. So what we're looking for here is where this horizontal beam intersects with these vertical pieces. So you can see right now, if we were just to go straight up and down, it doesn't work. It needs to be at somewhat of an angle. So what I'll do is I'm gonna get it to a point where it's barely touching or intersecting on the surface there. Remove angle snap, get the rotation again, and slowly rotate it. And what you're looking for is for this line and this line to be parallel to one another. And again, doesn't have to be exact, but close. That's close enough. And what you should find then is as you move up and down this piece that they should stay about the same. So it looks like we're a little bit off. So I'm going to come back down here, and it looks like I need to move it outwards just a tad. Yeah, so now when I move this piece up and down, it's the amount that's intersecting is about the same. You can see that if you look right here as I move it. It stays pretty consistent. And the benefit of that is that now we know when we do the shingles across that they're all going to line up well. So move that piece off to the side and keep it there. And then we're going to use that piece. So if you go into wall decorations, there's all of these brackets. And the one that I like the most for shingles is this bracket number 4. So you see here, it's not at the right angle correctly, or correct angle, obviously. So hit angle snap. Rotate it down 45 degrees, or 90 degrees, I should say. And now you've got your shingles. So now it's just a matter of filling in the gaps, and this gets a little tedious. So I'll probably cut ahead here for a second where you see the finished product. But this is, you copy them across and then you copy these pieces and move them up. Okay, so now those are all filled in, and I'm glad this actually happened, because even though we lined that up correctly, we still have these shingles sticking out from these sort of corner pieces. There's a pretty easy way to remedy that. So before I do that, though, I'm going to sort of add in some variants here. So anytime you're copying something, you want to kind of go back and make sure there's not, a crazy pattern developing. Yeah, so I think that's okay. So we'll select all of that, deselect those two pieces. And then there's a couple ways you can fix this. So one, you can just go to the world axis. You can move it in, and that would be perfectly fine. It's still gonna look like the building you want it to be, and it's not anything that anyone's ever gonna notice. Or you can rotate it slightly inward. Make sure your angle snaps off. So rotate it inward, bring it down a little bit. There you go. Do that, and I'll get rid of that piece. And move that one in a little bit. Okay, so now that that's done, then I'm just going to randomly select some pieces here. Again, no right or wrong way to do this. Just randomly selected some spots. Then make this a lot darker. And then I'm going to make some that are a shade lighter as well. That's pretty good. There you go. Now you've got some variety in your shingle texture. Now to copy this around, well, first let me do this. We'll go up. And I think actually I'm going to make this the 2 meter piece. Let's go to 2 meter beam. Bring it in. I'm not too worried about how much they overhang because we'll adjust that once it's copied over. And then come back. We can delete that piece now because we don't need it anymore. And come back in here. Looks like we've got everything. You can deselect that piece if you want, because as you rotate this around, it's going to automatically already have a piece there. So we'll deselect that. Right there. Oh, you know what, too? I forgot to copy that piece, but I'll show you we can fix that really easily. Control D to duplicate these, and then just put them into place. And then delete the extra piece there. And we'll do the same thing to just copy around that piece. So Control D. Control D. Oops. And Z. Okay. Then you would do what we did in episode 1. Just fine tune these pieces here. And then duplicate that up top. And then to fill in the top here, this is the benefit of having that non-grid piece attached up here, is you can constantly pull from it, and you know whatever you're taking from here is going to be centered. So we'll go into scenery and art shapes. And that's not quite big enough. There you go. Angle snap on. And just lower it down. Maybe there. And then we're going to recolor it that same color. Now, the art shapes are quite a bit brighter than the wooden pieces, so I'm just going to come in here and make it slightly darker. And now it looks a little bit more seamless. So there you go. That is how you make a custom roof. Again, not a ton of variety of pieces necessary. You certainly could get much more detailed. Like maybe, for example, you want there to be a dormer, and so you would bring a window up. I like these, where are they? Like these rounded ones here. So you could absolutely, put in a dormer on here as well. There's tons of ways you can add detail and variety, but the base structure is not that difficult to do. It's a little bit time consuming, yes, but the results I think are worth it, and it's just one more way to get more flexibility out of the game and to start doing some of the things that you might be seeing a lot of YouTube creators use. So that is it for the third episode here. In episode 4, we're going to be getting into custom domes. So thanks guys so much for watching. Again, if you haven't had a chance to, go ahead and click the link in the description to download the park and follow along as we continue to progress. Thanks. We'll see you in episode 4.